Over the course of the last 10 years, where I've had a part-time job as a college professor teaching music technology, film scoring, and other subjects at the Copeland School of Music, Queens College, City University of New York, I've seen quite a few projects done by my students. My students, they work really hard for the most part, and they learn quite a bit, and I'm pretty happy with the progress they make overall. I have a very wide range of training and ability throughout my classes. The classes are combination undergraduate and graduate meeting at the same time. I'll get a student who took some piano lessons as a kid and has some interest in music and production, so they've signed up for the music and production minor program. And then I'll typically get a music education student who's a graduate student, and they're learning some technology because they'll need it as music teachers in secondary schools. Most of my students come from the jazz studies program, where students want to learn how to record themselves and create music in the computer to help with their careers. Some of these students have had no sequencing training before, and others have had a class maybe at the Berklee School of Music in Boston, a wide range of abilities and training. No matter how accomplished the student is musically or how much experience they've had before they start taking my class, one thing is universal. They all need work sequencing acoustic guitar parts. And that's what this video is about today. I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I use to make them sound a little bit better. Obviously, it's worlds of difference if you have a really good acoustic guitar player and a microphone in a nice room. But if you're demoing a song and you want to get the idea across, it's really good to know just what you're doing when you're sequencing an acoustic guitar. And also, sometimes you have to have something done by a deadline and you don't have time to get somebody around. There are several facets of the guitar physically in terms of how it's constructed and also how you play it that give unique challenges to doing an authentic sequenced performance. So let's take a look at the guitar for a second. All right, so the guitar has 6 strings, and today we're just going to talk about standard tuning. There are alternate tunings that we'll look at maybe in another video, but right now let's just talk about the standard tuning. So the lowest string, or the string highest up on the guitar, is an E. And then the next is an A, D, G, B, and E. And then if you just strum the open strings, you'll notice that down and up. And if you use a plectrum, you have a downstroke and an upstroke, right? The guitar has many ways of creating chords, but typically what's used for an acoustic guitar in a pop music situation are open chords. And they will be typically chords that look like this. And what they do is they have a lot of strings that ring that aren't being fretted. Okay, so let's take a look at that on the computer screen. This is notation for guitar. Now, there'll be a standard MIDI file linked in the description box below so that you can take this lesson and open it up in any notation software or any DAW and work with this stuff. The guitar is a transposing instrument. The notes that you write, when a guitar player plays these notes, they sound an octave lower. So this is an E, which is the E below middle C on a piano, but it actually sounds an octave lower than that. So that's the first thing to know, is that the guitar is a transposing instrument. And those are the open notes played on an acoustic guitar sample. There are 9 open chords. Starting from the first one here, we have E major, E minor, G major, C major, D major, D minor, F major, A major, and A minor. So if I were to show you those chords on the guitar, right? E major looks like this. E minor looks like this. G major looks like this. C major looks like this. D major looks like this. D minor looks like this. F major looks like this. A major looks like this. And A minor looks like this. Let's take a look at the sheet music for a second. You'll notice that some of these chords use 6 notes, all 6 notes of the guitar. And some of these chords use 5 notes, like right here, and then 4 notes. So that when you're playing a D major chord, when you're strumming that, you're only playing the highest 4 strings. And then you've got D, A, D, and F sharp. Same thing with an F major chord. Just the top 4 strings. If we look at that G major chord in notation, which is right here, this is a problematic chord for me because of the way it's voiced. You've got a triad in close position, and then you've got this octave filled in with a 5th here. What you can do alternatively, and let's take a look at it on the guitar, we've got here, right? What you can do is you can lose the B here and just mute that note and just strum like that. You get G, D, G, D, G, right? So that gives you a majorish sound even though there's no B. Alternatively, you could take this finger off the string and play. There are alternate ways of playing that G chord. Now, the other thing is that if you take these chords, like the E major chord, right? You've got E, B, and E. If you move this finger here, the ring finger, you're playing an E7 chord, right? And if you voice it like this, you've got an E major 7th chord. Right, with a G chord, G7 chord. With a C chord, sometimes you'll see some players put the G in the bass, and sometimes you'll see players play something like this, where they don't finger a fret here, the C, they leave it open. You got C, E, G, B, C major, 7th, and then you can also put your finger here and have the dominant 7th, and then the same thing with the D chord. You've got a D7 there, D major 7th there, A major 7th, A dominant 7th, right? And the same with the minor, A minor 7th. Even within those open chords, you can have some upper extensions, 7ths. One of the first things to making an authentic guitar part is learning picking patterns. There are a lot of different picking patterns, and if you did a Google search, you'd find plenty that you could study. Let's take a listen to this and then we'll talk about it. All right, so to me, that's a decent sound, and I'm just using Expand. So I'm not using an expensive guitar sample library. I'm using Expand, which has got to be at least 15 years old at this point. Now, if we look at this, we can break this up into 2 distinctive parts happening at once. You can have the A going to the C, going to the D, to the downbeats, and then you've got this other activity up here, which is a broken arpeggio on a triad. So you've got and then the part that fills in. When you play something on the guitar, this is still ringing. Right, so you can notes ring out until you dampen them, right? with your right hand or your left hand. In order to simulate that, I make liberal use of the sustain pedal. So you can see I'm changing it on the downbeat. Now, the other thing is accented and unaccented notes. So I want my downbeat strong, and then what I really want to do is emphasize that this is an A minor triad. So you can see I've got a little bit more velocity on those notes that make up the triad, and then these in-between notes that are on the offbeats, on the end of each beat, they're a little bit softer. And you could even make those softer if you'd like. You could bring that down. Now, there's other things that you can do with this where you can move one of the notes. So let's say I take this note here and I go up a step. And let's say this note here, right? And we can change the pattern just a little bit. Right? And all that stuff is easily doable on the guitar. So this is another picking pattern. And again, this is something where you could play around with an order of the notes. And, right, so you could have something that's like this. It changes the feel of it around, right? And yeah, you could do it on alternate. So that's another kind of picking pattern. Let's move right ahead. Now this one here, we're going to break up each bar into 3 groups of eighth notes. So the first one is 3. So we've got these 3 notes, another group of 3, and then 2. So we've got chuck it, check it, check it, check it, check it, check it. And it's just a different feel, a different flow. And you'll notice that you have, this is almost like a bass line, right? And then these are the moving parts. Boom, 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 boom. You hear that all the time. Now let's do one where we go in a different direction, right? It doesn't have to always be up. It can be the low note, and then see these are descending on this pattern here. And again, this is also breaking up 3, 3, and 2, but instead of going to the 5th, so in other words, G, D, and D, so that's the root of a G chord and the 5th of the G chord. This is the root of the E chord on all of those important eighth notes. Okay, so there's 2 things here that are interesting. Okay, so the first one here is this business right here. Now this should really be a D sharp, but notation in Pro Tools. So let me show you what's going on here on the actual guitar. So what we're doing is, for that one measure, we're playing an A chord. And then you take this chord here and just move the whole thing up a whole step. And you're only picking the top 3 strings. So you get this really nice half-step rub with the open E and then a D sharp here. And you can even just do that with 2 fingers. The last bit is at the end. This very last note here, right? That's called a harmonic. I set that up by moving the mod wheel. It's part of the program. And that's just basically what you do on the guitar, for those of you that don't know, is you find spots on the guitar where there's an even division of space between the nut and the bridge, and the 12th fret is that. And you just gently rest your finger on the string right above the fret, and then you get that bell-like sound. And a good player can make that work. Now, this next bit here is descending bass lines, right? Or just having a bass line move. So let me show you this on the guitar, what I mean by that. On that example, we'll get back to it. It was basically a C chord, an open C chord. And what you can do is you can move these low notes down stepwise. And then you could do it on the F chord. And again, notice the sustain pedal, and we can actually take these low notes and just emphasize them a little bit. That might be too much. Now, this is problematic because I don't want the bass note to be muddy, so I'm pedaling. But then these open strings like the G and the E string, they would still be ringing out. Right, you can hear that this stops ringing. Now, there's two solutions to that, actually. I could do this where I could just keep these. The notation's going to look whack then, which is why I don't typically do this. Right, I could do something like this. Come on. And that'll help, but there's another solution which I like better because it gives you a little bit more, a few more options. Let's leave it that way. At this point in the video, I'd like to take a break to do a little housekeeping. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and to be notified, ring that bell. Please leave any comments or questions down below. If you want to further support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. There's a link for that down below as well. And just a reminder, there's a standard MIDI file linked in the description box that you can download for free, and you can load it into any DAW or any notation software if you want to further explore this lesson. What you can do with the guitar is you can play a chord, and then you can strum it again and play an open note, and then quickly put your finger down on the fretted note in rhythm, and you can create a hammer-on. Right? And you notice now I've got two tracks. Let me show you why. Right? Sounds good. What I did was I played the whole thing in on one track. I copied these notes from here, and then I deleted them, and then I pasted them onto this track. Then I did a little work with the MIDI. You'll see that the notes overlap. And the reason that that works well is because I've taken the program and I've made it into mono instead of polyphonic with last note priority. Let's just solo out this one track. Here we go. Right, you don't hear you're in ba-ya. If I make this poly, right, you can hear there's a double attack there. That really helps. Okay, let's do this, and you could do more than just those two notes. You could do a pattern like this. That's pretty cool. Now with this next one, the rhythm's a little whack. Let's take a look at it here and let's make each one of those tracks a different color. You'll recognize this pattern, right? Okay, so that is a very famous song that most of you know. And what you're doing on the guitar for that, right? So you're hitting an open string and then fretting there and then pulling off. And then, so you're doing a pull off on those three notes. So that's the opposite of a hammer on, is a pull off. Let's just solo this track here. Now you could see that for some of these, I've got them overlapping, and on some of them I don't. Right, you can see on the last, there's a little space here. I can even make it a little bigger. And so we get our attack and then hammer and pull. Biddy it up. And then over here, and when you play both of them together, right? So that really helps, right? That mono bit and understanding how to make a hammer on and a pull off. Now, is that as good as, is that really as good as somebody playing it? No, not as good as somebody good playing it. But somebody will hear that, they'll know it sounds guitaristic. And if it's in a track that has other instruments playing and it's well mixed, and it'll be passable, right? I've used sampled acoustic guitars on film scores that have gone on air. They're not exposed, and maybe there's an real acoustic guitar playing something different, and you get confused by having both of them and you can't tell what's going on. But it definitely helps to understand these tricks. All right, so there's another playing technique where you do two things at once with the guitar. You have a bass line and you have a rhythm filling in the bass line. So if I were to take a C7 chord, right, which is our open chord, and I were to do a bass line like this, and I'm palm muting, right? So I've got my palm resting on these two strings. Let me do it with this way. So how would you simulate that on a sample library? Well, you break it up into two tracks again. And what I did this time was I went and I found a fairly inexpensive acoustic guitar library, and this is with nylon string. And it's got all of these different articulations. So I've got one of these set up for mute, and I've got another one set up for just regular playing. All right, and you'll notice that some of these have pull off and hammer on and all sorts of different playing techniques. For this kind of thing, you just need to have mute and a full length of notes. If we just listen to the bottom one, right? And then we just listen to the top line. And this should actually be a B flat, but again, Pro Tools notation. And all together. Right? So that's pretty cool. This next bit here is a little bit difficult for me to play since I'm not such a great guitar player, but this is called Travis picking. And what this does is it has quarter notes in the bass, and then you're sort of filling in and doubling some of those notes rhythmically. So if you see here, we've got our boom, bump, right, in the bass. And then this first note of the upper part of this comes in with the second note in the bass part, and then you fill in on the offbeats after that. So this is a very standard picking pattern, and there are a lot of variations on this. That's got a really nice flow to it. Having those muted lower notes really, really helps. Now, the first time through, you could see that I'm just playing straight triads, right? And then the second time through, you'll see a little bit extra motion in the top part. Right? So C sharp, C sharp, C sharp, B. And that's very easy to do on the guitar. There's another thing about the guitar that's kind of cool, and that is having two strings playing the same pitch, and then also having this half step rub. So the first thing would be if I were to play a figure like this. Right? I've got a G here and an open G here. So that creates a different sound. You can hear whether it's a little off tuning or, you know, this is a thicker string and it's played higher up and this is an open string. You have a different timbre to it. So we'll go over a way to simulate that. And then another thing is to have G, F sharp, G. Those half step. You hear these guys play these things that are called waterfall scales and stuff. They do all sorts of things like that at a much more rapid pace than I can possibly do at this point. All right, so let me play this. These are both treble clef, and this is a figure in G, right? And this note is sounding G, F sharp, E, F sharp, right? But it's written B, B flat, G sharp, or A flat, I mean, right? So what am I doing there? Well, what I've done is that if you use the same program, I'm using this Sketch Nylon again, and on this other, let's make this smaller so we can see it. On the second track, I'm also using the Sketch. If I had these tuned so that they were playing the same pitches, you would hear all sorts of phasing issues because it would be playing the same sample. I've tuned this down 4 semitones. And then what I did was I played the figure on this track here, and you can see that the notes are still there. They're just muted out. They're gray. I simply copied these notes, the gray notes, and I pasted them onto the second track, and then I transposed them up 4 steps so that they're not playing the same sample. If any of you have watched any of Christian Henson's really wonderful videos, you'll see that he does stuff like that all the time. And he also talks about how taking samples and tuning them down typically sounds better than tuning them up, right? So using those techniques, we've got this really nice figure here. So let's, as a comparison, let's do this. Let's see. Let's solo acoustic guitar 6 and get this off of here. And then let's just unmute some of these notes here so that we can hear them. And we'll hear what it sounds like. All right, so this is just these. Right, it sounds much more mechanical. much better. So that's another really good tip. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is a mixing issue. So right here, I've got, and I'm going back to expand 2. I've got the same part played and using the same program, I pasted it onto a second track. So if we listen to just the top track here, that should be coming out of your left ear right now. And then this one should be coming out of your right ear. Now, when you listen to them together, it's mostly coming out of the center. I've got MIDI pan. And now all of a sudden, stereo. Now you got to be careful if this is going to be in mono, because then it'll start sounding a little funny. Maybe you can just do 25 ticks later. It just sounds like a slap delay, right? But you can really hear that it's much wider in the headphones. Okay, that brings us to the end of this video, and that's 5, 6 if you account the mix tip at the end, but 5 different techniques that will improve your acoustic guitar programming or sequencing. Now, I didn't go over strumming, and there's so many more other topics to go over. If this video does well, I'll make another one in this vein, talking about more topics. Anyway, please like, subscribe, share, ring that bell. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. There's a link in the description box below. I've been Pete Calandra. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.